Alright guys, so today we're going to look at the next part of the Renaissance, the art and literature section, where we address the idea of the Renaissance man, and who these Renaissance guys were. Sorry, no fancy hats today, I tried to find one, but it wouldn't fly. So, we're still looking at who the Renaissance men are. These are the Renaissance men: Leonardo, Michelangelo, Donatello, Raphael. No, they're not really Renaissance men. They were the men of my childhood. I worshipped these guys when I was about 7 years old. But instead, it's actually going to be the guys they're named after: Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo Buonarroti, Donatello de Bardi, and Raphael Sanzio. These here are the true Renaissance men: the artists, the architects, the engineers, the guys who were the geniuses of their time and changed the idea of art forever. In class, we're looking at their artwork and kind of seeing the kind of things that they create. Now, we already talked about Leonardo a little bit. This obviously being Leonardo's most famous work, The Last Supper. You kind of see the damage to it over time as part of the process they did with the paint. The paint was actually a water-based paint, and it was done on top of wet plaster. And so over time, it's going to start chipping away. It's been repaired a few times and restored, but it's a very, very delicate painting. So here's one of Leonardo's very famous paintings. Here's some of Raphael's work. You can see it's a lot more detailed, a lot more clear than Da Vinci's is. You kind of see a lot of very Christian themes with the Last Supper. Here's the crucifixion here. Very cool parts to Raphael's work. We're going to analyze another Raphael's paintings in class, actually, called The School of Athens. Here's Donatello's. Oh, not that Donatello. Here's one of Donatello's biggest works. This is the statue of David. This is a bronze statue, okay? It's made out of solid bronze. It was casted. And the thing about this statue is that, first off, it was the first bronze statue since the age of Rome. And second of all, the first statue that portrayed somebody naked. That was the other part of it. It was very, very revolutionary at the time to actually show artwork this way. But once again, another biblical figure. For a very secular time, a lot of the artwork they did was still church related, mostly because the church paid for it. This here would be Lorenzo de Medici. Remember from our role play activity, he actually paid for Cosimo paid for this for his a wedding at his house. So this actually stood just in the courtyard of a rich guy's house, Cosimo de Medici. We have Michelangelo, who we call the Sistine Chapel in the Vatican. Here's some examples of the Sistine Chapel here. You see the detail to the paintings. Now imagine painting this. I'll show you a bigger zoomed out picture here of this. Imagine lying on your back on top of a scaffold all the way up here by the ceiling and painting all these different scenes. Once again, a lot of biblical scenes here in terms of the Bible, that kind of stuff. We'll see this one being this one here, where it is. You see the whole grand scope of the Sistine Chapel here. Here's obviously the most famous part of it. You see is basically the creation of mankind through the biblical view here. So it's kind of where that comes from there. The way the art looked back then, this is one of the big parts you want for your notes here. The way the art looked, I have the Mona Lisa up here, our famous painting by Da Vinci, is that Renaissance art and sculpture is more lifelike than Middle Ages. First off, look at the lifelike. You can tell the features of the face. You can tell the emotion here on the face. All those things you can tell in terms of the piece here. Okay, and so all these ideas are more lifelike in terms of how the paintings actually look. Two, proportions and shadows. You see the shadow here underneath the chin, shadow by the eyes, the shadows in the background. All that shadow really adds a lot to the depth of the painting. You can tell it's a real person, kind of the features that way. Also, the first use of oil painting. This is more in the Northern Renaissance versus the Italian Renaissance. The Italians still use a lot of water-based paint, but oil paintings were used more, and oil paintings stayed longer than water-based paint did. Also, depth in the painting. So here we have what's called perspective. I drew these lines on here to see. You kind of tell that the painting has a 3D effect to it, and these four lines all kind of go back to one center point. You get the depth. You can see the Mona Lisa here in front of the background here. You can kind of see the depth to the painting going back toward this one center point. And so it's a big part of the painting this way. Lastly, a lot of paintings are done in fresco style. Paintings like the Mona Lisa are done on canvas or on wood, but the big paintings, especially if I go back here a little bit, like we have a Sistine Chapel, we're done fresco style, where it's done on top of the plaster. I look at the Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper, done the same way, where it was done on top of the plaster. So those are called frescoes. Kind of go back for our pictures here. Those are called frescoes, and that was kind of where we have the use of water-based paint on top of the fresh plaster to make the painting stand. These are usually big paintings we're talking, or very, very small paintings. So it comes that way. So let's compare here. So first off, here's an example of medieval art. Okay, it's Middle Ages art. Look at the forms here. not exactly accurate in terms of proportions. A lot of it was Christian themed, but not all of it. There are a couple pieces here, like this one we looked at in class, that's not Christian themed. Here are a few more examples. You see, not really a lot of shadows, not a lot of depth, very, very two-dimensional painting to it. Sculptures are not very accurate. This has a little more depth here. This is kind of at the very end of the Middle Ages, probably. Not very accurate sculptures, not very proportional. All those kind of ideas. Kind of see the difference there. Here, in comparison, is the Renaissance art. The statue here is called the Pieta, made by Michelangelo Buonarroti, one of the most famous sculptures, probably my favorite sculpture overall. If you ever go to St. Paul, Minnesota, they have an exact replica of this in the Cathedral of St. Paul. Very, very cool, lifelike, very, very lifelike statue. You see the shadows in here. It's a very bad picture, but the shadows are in there, all those kind of ideas. You see the human forms are definitely more true here in terms of the forms. The eyes, all kinds of looks more human-like. The domes here done in a more grand scale. They're made by Brutus Shelley. You can see the shadow used here. Looks not very lifelike. Very, very real in terms of the painting. They didn't have cameras back then, so to take a painting of a person was the same thing as saying, having a picture of them, the same kind of deal. Now, besides the Italians, there's also Northern Renaissance painters as well. They're in an area called Flanders, which is basically modern-day Belgium. They're the ones that actually used the oil paintings for the first time. They learned perspective. So Jan van Eyck, who paints this one up here, and Albert Durer, who this painting right here is actually a self-portrait that he made himself right here. No common sense hairstyle, please. They learned how to do the perspective portion from the Italians, but they also went for themselves more realistic settings. So here, once we had a Christian theme here, but here's just kind of a self-portrait, very, very simplistic setting, kind of put people where they belong. And so Northern Renaissance is a little bit different from the other Renaissance in that way. Literature is the other part where humanism comes into play. Now, a lot of the humanists wrote in Latin, Latin being the language of the church, but other ones wrote in the idea of vernacular. Vernacular was basically local language. So if you're in Italy, you spoke Italian. In France, you spoke French. In Germany, you spoke German. England, English, so on and so forth. Okay, it's kind of like what certain things mean in certain places around the country. I mean, up here we call we call a soda or pop. Is it a bubbler or a water fountain? If you go down south and you ask for a soda, they'll laugh at you because you got to order a Coke. Uh, that's the idea here. There are two really big pieces that are made in vernacular. The reason they're made in vernacular is so everybody can read them. It's called the Divine Comedy, written by Dante, and then the Canterbury Tales, written by Chaucer, great writers of this time. The Divine Comedy, written by Dante, was basically written in Italian, not Latin. He took the ideas from Virgil, who had written in Latin, and he wrote it in Italian so that all people could understand it. Humanism. All right, the idea that everyone could read it, everyone could learn from it. The story essentially follows the soul from heaven to hell, where it goes. The part called Dante's Inferno is my favorite part. It talks about the 7 circles of hell. Here's an 8th circle, but that's where Justin Bieber lives. That's where that kind of idea comes in. But this idea is written in Italian so everyone can read it. Canterbury Tales by Chaucer is the same way. The story follows 29 different travelers and 29 different stories as they go from London and all over England to the grave of Thomas à Becket. He was a member of the church, a bishop of the church who was murdered accidentally in a way. His murder was accidentally ordered, and they're going to visit his grave. And basically, as these travelers are at this inn here, they have to all tell different stories about what they're doing and what their life is like. So it's first off, it's written in English. It's tough for us to read today. It's in ye old English a little bit, but you hear stories from all different kinds of classes of people. There's a noble knight there. There's a person who works as a miller. There are men. There are women. There are rich. There are poor. You hear different varieties, different stories from all different kinds of people. It definitely has that humanist idea to it that way. My favorite is Miller's Tale. Ask your English teacher. Anyway, it's a very interesting tale. Has some very interesting dialogue to it. Anyway, long story short, very interesting stories about what they're talking about in the Canterbury Tales by Chaucer. But also, big thing here is vernacular, and you kind of get everybody's different view of what life is like and how you're supposed to live your life. Lastly, there were some women writers during this time, the most famous being Christine de Pizan. She's a French woman. Okay, but she wrote in vernacular. I want to say Italian if I remember right. She wrote a book about life as a woman in the Ladies of Pizan. Basically writing in the Italian language and kind of gives a woman's perspective as to what life is like for them and questioning, hey, Why can't I learn? Why can't I do things? Why can't I be the same as a man can? And kind of as the first kind of to bring up the ideas of equal rights for women, equal ideas of education, that kind of thing for women. And so we do see women writers as well. Last question talks about Shakespeare. You can skip it. We'll talk about him a little later on. Make sure that you are anybody who is artists for their presentation is ready to go on Monday or Tuesday, whichever it is, for Michelangelo and Raphael. And I will see you guys then. Thank you very much. Make sure your notes are done for next week, Monday. Thank you very much.